What's up, Moto Buddies? Mike here from Moto Co. We've got a 2024 Husqvarna FE501W. This is the new model designation for what was formerly known as the FE501. It didn't have the W, it was just a standard FE, and then the S was the street model. So this would have been the off-road model, the like the green sticker off-road bike. The FES would be the plated bike, and in KTM over on that side, the orange bikes were known as the EXCF for the plated, and then the EXCFW was the off-road bike, the green sticker bike. And so for 2024, on the KTM side, this model is known as the XWF, and they just changed the model names, but the designation essentially is the same. They have a headlight and a tail light, but these are not plated, and in certain states these are not platable. You cannot convert these bikes over. Those DMVs are wise to the fact that this is not an EPA regulated 50 state bike. This is an off-road bike only, and so you will have that hard time and impossibility if you're thinking about getting one of these off-road models and then converting it to a plated. There are states that are friendly to that, and then some that are not. So that's a quick disclaimer on the front end. So this is a brand new bike. This is a new Moto shop bike. We picked up a Husky for the primary reason that we've shied away from Husqvarnas over the last few years, especially with the 2020 models, because of the fragile subframe. So they had a single bolt attachment subframe where the sub came down. Let me pop the air cover here and I'll show you a couple of interesting things about how the subframe on the new chassis works. I've never taken this off. Here we go. So it's two little snap pins on the front. So the subframe now on the Huskies is the same as the KTM, and it has this aluminum spar. So this is a load-bearing spar that the previous generation 20 through 23 did not. And so for the durability reason of this, pretty much alone, is the reason I went ahead and got the Husqvarna over the KTM. I think the other reason is the fact that, let's see if we can get some sun on the frame. The frame has just got the most beautiful blue with some sparkles in it. How could I resist? So when I found out about the paint, I went ahead and got a Husky instead of a KTM. Otherwise, because of the subframe and now with that sparkle paint, it completely persuaded me. I'm a little more fond of the reason I typically would prefer a KTM over Husky is because of the linkage. And I'm not anti-linkage, but I prefer a PDS. I like the feel of a PDS. We do a lot of Baja bashing, rock bashing, off-roading. And so because of the linkage down here, it's just one more thing to catch on a rock and to get you hung up over obstacles. So that's something I'll get used to. And this bike weighs a little more. The power characteristics are just slightly different. Husqvarna markets their models, their bikes, more to like the gentleman racer, a little more sophisticated design. The plastics are a little more sophisticated. It's just more of an upscale look and feel to the bike. And then with a little bit of weight penalty and a little price penalty, and then with the under clearance penalty. So I'm willing to compromise on some of those things because I got the frame color that I think is just fantastic. And so we're gonna experiment here and see how it goes. So our first observations and impressions on this all new bike, this is the first time we've had a chance to see the 500 class engine, and really liking it so far. So let's start out the back here and just talk about a few things that are unique to the new platform over the previous generation, and then unique to the Husky. So they use Brake Tech for the hydraulics, and that is a Spanish company that was part of the gas deal, and Brake Tech is now owned by Brembo, so it comes with the same reliability and backing. Some riders will say that they prefer Brembo. I'm not so sure that I agree. I think the Brake Tech does a great job. You have to be a pretty finicky rider and really have a lot of finesse feel to discern whether or not the Brake Tech doesn't do as good a job as Brembo. But I'm of the opinion that they do. They went with a larger rear axle. It was 20 millimeters in the past generation, and now it's 22. And then it's an all new. I won't go through and list all the new. Maybe I'll kind of skip over some things. The spec sheet talks about that. It's about a 90% all new bike from the previous generation. And there's just so much new about it that I won't dive in. I'll hit a couple of high points. So it's an all new head and new engine configuration, and I think they've done a couple of things that I really like with the new, some of the new I think touches. They talk about, like on here, they tell you things that the previous bikes didn't tell you. So they tell you this is the oil, this is the coolant drain. If there's this little triangle, that means that there's a copper washer that goes between the bolt and then whatever it's attaching to. So there's some really nice touches there with that. The same thing is happening on the other side of the case. Here at the stator cover, there is a little triangle that's letting you know. They also tell you what the torque values are for the bolts. So you can see here, this is the screen, and then they tell you the torque values here, and then this is the drain bolt, the main oil drain bolt, and they tell you torque values there. They also tell it to you here on the triple clamps, which they have done on the cast, or I'm sorry, rather the billet clamps in the past, but now the forged clamps do that as well. You will know that there is a new fuel pump design, and so the fuel pump is here high and at the center of the tank. And so the hose routing is a little different. No longer do you have the bottom tap at the bottom of the tank. This is the vapor recovery system. It used to be located here on a little post behind the primary sprocket. They moved it out here. It is probably going to be in the way. So let's talk about this really quick. So what is the vapor recovery system for? What it's doing is it's capturing vapors that are coming off the fuel tank. They go through this hose. They're captured into a little charcoal recovery canister that's here in the frame. You have these two hoses that come out. Those hoses blend, and then they go into the valve here. This is from the charcoal canister, and then this hose right here goes over to the intake side. Here on the intake side is where those vapors are drawn in. The ECU commands that solenoid to turn on and off at specific times, and it sucks out, drains out any vapors that are inside of that tank. There's also a little overflow chamber right here. So if you tip over and you have liquid gas that comes out of it, there's a check bearing in here. But let's say vapors come out of here, then that liquid then will be channeled into this little cavity right here. And there's a drain at the bottom. You see there's a little connector here, and you could drain any of that liquid fuel that had accumulated in there. And then those vapors, as that fuel off gases, then they're also going to be sucked into the system. So that's what that's for. And riders who transport their bikes in the back of vans or trucks with shells or inside of any closed compartment, you would do well to leave that system on, because these bikes with that system, then they don't off gas into the vehicle, and you don't have all those fumes. So by removing it, you will have then those vapors come out of the tank, and then that's why you have a smelly van and a headache when you get there. So there's some thought that should go into whether or not you leave that on or take that off. And that's potentially the secondary thing about that, is there's some reliability issues that may happen with this, especially where it's located. And so I think we'll come out with an alternate bracket, because there are plenty of riders, and there's just cause for leaving this system on, and there's just cause for taking it off. So for those who want to leave it on, I don't like where it's placed. I'm neutral on the system itself. Again, pros and cons for it, but I think this is a little bit of an ill-conceived location. As you can see, your leg and your foot are right here, so I can see some damage happening to that, so we'll deal with that. There's debate about whether or not the start and stop switch work well. I think they do. There are people who complain that there's not a real good haptic feedback feel. I think the tactile feel of that is just fine. Even with gloves, I don't have a problem with it. However, the Moto-minded bomber switch is a nice upgrade with a much better switch feel, so we'll upgrade that. Plus it's billet as opposed to plastic. I have seen some reports and posts of people who have broken that. Of note is the BrakeTech master cylinder for both the clutch and then the brake side as well. You don't have mirror perches. We're making a set of mirror perches that will allow you to drive the pin out of here and then to put mirrors on this. If you do want to do a little bit of mirror work, they have an all new headlight configuration. We showed this on a previous video, so we won't dive into it here. This is the Husky version of it, and there's the on off switch right there. I like that it's a detent switch instead of the push pull. I've also heard some reports of mud. There's this little side mechanism here. Let's see if we can get in and see that. You see there's that little plunger in the side right here that's moving up and down. And so that's going to become vulnerable to mud and water. So I think that there's going to be some reliability issues with that switch over time, but we'll see. And then we'll probably start working on an upgrade for that. So with the seat off, you can see the new configuration of the fuel pump and how the fuel line is routed through the center of the chassis down, comes out here under the frame, and then goes down here into the injector, which is underneath that motor mount. And I think that works pretty well. One tip you might find useful is it's difficult once you're trying to put the tank back on to keep that hose going down through the center of the chassis. So what we do on these new bikes is we snip off this Oetiker clamp, and then we'll put on a screw type clamp, and then we'll remove the hose here from the tank instead of doing it down there. It just makes it a little simpler. New battery replacement location, same Skyrich battery that KTM Austrian products have come with for the last few years. And here's the new, this is the PDM, power distribution module, and I forget what KTM calls it, the off-road control center, ORC or something like that, and we've talked about that before. Here's the dealer diagnostic port. This connector here goes to the voltage regulator, which is now located here in the air box, and I've got my finger on it right there, but it's kind of in this general area. This is the tip over sensor, now relocated here. ECU is obviously here, held into a new rubber bracket. Up front, you have a new style headlight. We have talked about this before. You have an LED headlight now, and they claim it's 300% brighter, and I believe it. New sealed connector. There are new seal type connectors up here as well. This is for the start kill switch. And then you still have Molex open connectors at various points on the bike. This right here is for that on and off switch. This is where you would plug in the left-hand control switch if you're going to dual sport this. And we will be dual sporting this bike, and we have a kit coming that will allow you to upgrade this if you wanted to go the route of putting a plate on it, and it'll be a plug and play all with OEM connectors and functions, and that look for that releasing from us here very, very soon. Pointing out something here behind the headlight mask, you'll see there are two wires from the cluster, the instrument unit that's coming out, and they are cut. There's an orange and a green wire right here. This now goes into a single connector, a single weather tight connector. Before, in the previous generations, you had individual small Deutsch connectors like this, 2s and 3s. What they did for manufacturing simplicity, makes a lot of sense, is they just ganged all these together into a big one. It's probably a 8 or a 10, and that is combined. So this is sort of unusual, and we're going to investigate and see what's going on with that. Something else to point out here is a CAN bus end of line. This dongle right here is where you would plug a map switch in. Now, a bit of a disappointment, there was some preliminary news that these bikes would get quick shifter and launch control, and then a map switch, and that is not going to be happening for North America. The software will not be available, even though the harness is configured to have it, the ECU. So what this thing is, this is the KTM My Wi-Fi dongle that would have been plugged in, and that function, that module never has been offered, and so really don't have any information about that, but that's where that would be plugged, and this is that map switch plug. KTM North America is not going to offer the software to enable that function, and so there will be no map switch, quick shifter, and launch control for the Enduro bikes. Overall, we're super pleased and impressed with the new platform. We're going to go out and do some riding today. Right now, we're at the Dusty Lizard event in Park City, Utah in Camas, and this is a Moto Co event, co-sponsored with Taco Moto and Ruby Moto headlights. So this is Friday morning, so the first morning people are starting to arrive. This will be packed out, and then we're going to get up into the hills and do some riding, do some real testing on the bike. So we'll have more content coming soon. So keep watching on our channel for more of that. Thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe, go out, get some adventure.